וכי נפשי אס השם. Today on the Tractate Shabbat, page 43, we're going to study many important or even very important practical halachot. We're going to learn the halachot of stira, binyan, muktzeh, ohel, and dealing with dead body in Shabbat. 43 at the top of the page, ATV, כופים קערה על הנר שלו יוחז בקורה. Abaye asked from the Mishnah that we're going to study in Kuf Kaf Aleph 121. Here is the question Abaye asked. If you take a bowl and you basically overturn on the oil can, so the flame will not set fire on the beam. Meaning, the sages allow to take a vessel and moving it so in order to avoid a prevention. So the key is that as long as the lit of the flame, the candle, is not extinguished, it's fine. In other words, as long as you leave a little space between the bowl, between the vessel and the candle, so the candle can continue on to be burned, it's fine. The Mishnah Brura in Reish Ayin Zayin 277 explained it, that you take this cheres, this porcelain bowl, and you place it at the top of the candle. As long as you leave space and you not extinguish it, is okay. But if you take, for example, matechet, something that made out of copper, and you cover it, it's a problem, because what you're doing is you're warming the copper. It's iron, and it's warmed by the heat of the candle. So it's like havara, it's like heating. So the poskim say that if it's a fear of fire and it's a saving life, pikuach nefesh, that's different. But if not, then you cannot do it. So here is the question. Abaye said, since this type of a lamp or this type of beam is muktzeh, how come you allow it? So Rabbah answered and he said, Bebatei gechinei, in a small, low ceiling houses, the shchiach behud leka. Do not compare small, tiny house that they have a low ceiling versus like in Jerusalem you see Arab houses that they have a very, very high ceiling. So when you have a low ceiling, if it's a fire, that's serious, because what happens is that when you have candle are very close to the ceiling, especially in ancient time. So that's the reason. Next question he asked, וכן קורה שנשברה סומכין אותה בספסל ובארוחות המיטה. He said that the same apply a beam of the roof that broke. So he said one may support it with a bench and with length of the bed frame, so it will not fail. Even though that it's uncommon case of preservation, it is permitted. So basically what Rashi said here, you cannot use a bench to pull it up. Why? Because it's part of the building. It's called boneh. That's one of the 39 prohibition. Now, Rabbi responded to that and he said, "Bichshu eichadetei de'avide defakei." Here you speak about very new beam. So it's a new beam, usually a break. So it's because the ceiling is very heavy on them. Last question. נותנים כלי תחת הדלף בשבת. We learn in ביצה 35 that water that dripping from the roof, like all of those that suffer from the last hurricane, right? So you see water from everywhere. So what happened is those water that coming out on Shabbat, it's a serious leak that coming from the ceiling. So they said you can put some type of vessel, some type of if you see those places that they have leakings, they take a very big vessel and they put, so the water would drip to that, so you don't have issue of mold, or you don't have issue of messing up the whole, whatever it is, can be walls, carpets, etc. And mainly in order to avoid that the whole house will preserve and not be such a way that people who have a sensitivity to mold, right, or allergy and other thing cannot live there. So usually they are water that leaking from the roof and are very dirty, and you cannot use them for any purpose, and therefore it's in a category of muktzeh. It's like set aside. And even it's not so common, especially remember in those days, you're talking about Balon, you're talking those days, it's not like you're living in places that it's a common hurricane, right? It's a mainly desert places. Even though the Mishnah allowed to carry a vessel in order to preserve that water. And he said again, Bevatei chadetei dishchi chededalfei. He said that's applied to new houses, that it's more common that they have this issue of leaking. Nothing new under the sun. That new houses, the people try to save money, the builders, so they make it cheaper materials. Right. One time I remember a builder, he built tremendously, and everyone complained that the materials wasn't the way he promised, that things wasn't right, etc., etc. Yet, when he built his own house, Rav Yosef Amar, you walk in, you see a like top materials, palace, everything was made like. Rav Yosef Amar Hainu Tama de Rav Chizda. Mishum de Kam Mevatel Kli Meichano. Rav Yosef said that this is a reason of Chizda, who allow to cover the hen's egg, but not placing a vessel on the meat of the hen in order to receive the egg, as we explained yesterday. Why? He said that Mishum de Kam Mevatel Kli Meichano, because by receiving the egg in the vessel, the negates a vessel. Basically, the vessel was available for any use. Since contain egg that may neither be used nor moved, the vessel too may no longer be carried. It's a tantamount to breaking the vessel, which means that bitul kli me'echano. In the beginning, the vessel was ready to use, and now we make the vessel muktzeh. That's what Rashi said. Because the minute the egg fall on that area, it's called basis ledavar asur, and therefore it's considering a muktzeh, and you cannot carry that vessel. Eitivei. Abaye, chavit shel tevel shnishbera, mevi kli acher mevi tachtia. It was a tevel, which is something that you need to take it tight, and you have that a chavit, a barrel. So you have in that barrel untied produce. So you cannot eat that product until it's tight. So what he can do, it's broken Shabbat, he bring another vessel and place it beneath the barrel so that the untied produce was not lost. Now you say that maybe it's a muktzeh, but the Ritva said that all the prohibition of kli meichano, it's even for saving something like that. Even you use something like in untied produce. Amarlei, Rav Yosef said to Abaye, Tevel muchanu etzel Shabbat. Tevel, because it's untied, but the minute you tight it, you can use it. It's basically something that it's not fully muktzeh. It's not set aside, because the minute you complete tightening it, you can use it. So, because tevel by itself, the food by itself, you can eat it. The only temporarily you cannot eat it because it's untied. So therefore, since the rabbis put a decree not to do it on Shabbat, so that food is ready to eat, you just need to tithe it. So im avar vetikno metukan, if someone violated this rabbinic decree and basically tithed, you can go ahead and allow to eat or carry that. So putting that vessel under the ein tithe product, it's considering bitul kli meichano, because the prohibition against making this tevel on Shabbat, which means taking tithe, and it's a rabbinic. So by putting that product set aside, it's not total. It's only because of this rabbinic. So therefore, many of the Farshim hold, like Rashba, Ritva, etc., that that's not considering bitul kli meichano. Another question. Notnin kli tachat haner lekabel nitzotzot. If you remember, we discussed that sparks that coming out from the candle, and those sparks can create fire, and it's a problem. So you may ask that those sparks are basically muktzeh, and anyway the Mishnah allowed to put a vessel to receive the white because of save, right? So he said even that it changed the status of that vessel because it was without, and now you put this vessel underward. Amar Avuna, the reason for that, Amar Avuna Breder Roshon nitzotzot en bahen mamash. He says that the sparks have no substance, which means that it's not the vessel, it become basis, and they burn and they dissolve as they fall into the bowl. So it's not something that you accumulate. So therefore it's not bitul kli meichano. That's basically Rashi said that that's based on Magen Avraham. Even the spark themselves, it's muktzeh, and you cannot carry it, but they don't make the vessel that they hold basis ledavar asur. Why? Because it's so the vessel can be used because it's not something that accumulates, it's not something that carries, it's just the sparks that fall there. Another question, וכן קורה שנשברה, סומכים אותה בספסל או בארוחות המיטה. He said a beam that broke, one may support it with a bench and with the length of a bed frame so that it will not fall. So even we're not allowed to move the safsal, the bench, from one location to another, but still we're allowed to use it because he attached it to the beam, and he cannot move it from one place to another. So what we allow to put together the beam, it's because the Rafi, the Ibaye Shakile, because that the bench is loosely supported the beam and not supporting its entire weight. So if one want to do it, he can take the bench. So it's not considering bitul safsal meichano. It's not negating it. נותנים כלי תחת הדלף בשבת. They say that you can place a vessel beneath a leak that it's dripping from the ceiling on Shabbat. So the dripping water, you have no use for that. He says בדלף הראוי. So he said that this speak about leak that is usable, basically is suitable for drinking. So since it has use, one is permitted to carry the water that was in a vessel, because it's not muktzeh. כופין את הסל לפני האפרוחים שיעלו וירדו. Here we're speaking again about they overturn a basket in front of the chicks so that they can climb up and down. Why? Because if a person does that, he negates the vessels, all the preparation for the chicks, because they moving them is prohibited on Shabbat. Basically, efrochim, the chicks, are muktzeh. any animals, considering in general a set aside, a muktzeh on Shabbat. Why? Because you cannot use it for anything that is a heter. So Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Shin Chet 308 elaborate, and he said that basically here these chicks, the minute you put the basket at the front of them, so that basket it's part of what they need. So it changes status, and you cannot move it. So kasavar mutar letaltelo. So he thought that you can go ahead and carry it. Why? Because as long as the chicks are sitting on that basket, it's the basis ledavar asur. It's the foundation for something that you not allow. So you cannot carry it from one place to another. But the minutes that they leave that spot and they move, they don't sitting still. They move those chicks. So then you can go ahead and carry it. Ve'atanya asur letaltelo. But we said that this type of basket you cannot carry it. So they said be'odan alav. This apply only as long as the chicks are there. But the minutes they leave, it's different. It's okay. Ve'atanya afal pi she'ein odan alav asur. We learn in different braita that if a person took at the middle of Shabbat this basket and put it at the front of those chicks, so that basket is forbidden to carry entire Shabbat, even the chicks left. So you cannot carry that. Why? So now we said because there is a concept in halacha that's called leyached et hadavar, which means you designating a certain item for certain purposes. So since you're designating that basket for the purpose of using the chicks, that they can be there, so therefore that basket cannot change its status during Shabbat. And considering muktzeh, so even the chicks left, it's still considering muktzeh. And also by putting that basket, it's called bitul kli meichano. You change the basket status to a different one. Amar Rabbi Abahu responded and he said be'odan alav kol ben hashmashot, which means all the time of twilight the chicks were sitting there on those baskets, and they said migo de it katzai le ben hashmashot katzai le kol hayam. That's a very important concept because we discussed that concept many times. A person at the time, for example, now Shabbat is so earlier, like 4:37 or so, 4:20, 4:25, 4:30, 4:35, getting close to Shabbat, people make all kind of statement, all kind of declaration, all kind of intent. So, for example, if we talk about chicks and a person see all those chicks sitting on the top of the basket, so he already make that basket available for the chicks. The fact that they left, even in the twilight, it's already became muktzeh, not just since it became muktzeh at the time of twilight. We say that that's carry on, not just for that time of twilight before Shabbat, it's carry on for the entire Shabbat. Even the status changed by having the chicks leaving that basket. So that's not apply only for that, it's applied to anything that you make. It's called migo. Anything that you make a muktzeh at that time of twilight, it's already carry on for the entire Shabbat. So basically we complete one idea, one very important component, which is Rav Chisda divided between putting a vessel under the hen in order to accept the egg, and taking a vessel at the top of an egg. So we explained that it's all apply for a saving, serious issue of saving, and the other one is the idea of bitul kli meichano. You change the status of the vessel. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, כשם שאין נותנים כלי תחת התרנגולת לקבל ביצתה, כך אין כופין עליה כלי בשביל שלא תישבר. He said, just as one may not place a vessel beneath a hen on Shabbat in order to receive its egg, so too one may not overturn a vessel onto the egg so that it will not break. So the GEMARA explained that he holds כסבר, he hold, אין כלי ניטל, אלא לדבר הניטל בשבת. A vessel may only be carried on Shabbat for the sake of an object that may be carried on Shabbat. Since the egg may not be carried on Shabbat, it's prohibited to carry the vessel for its sake. So now Rabbi Yitzchak asked all these questions on Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef in regards to carry a vessel. And he answered and he said, Veshani, and Rabbi Yitzchak respond, Be'tzarich limkomo, that it requires for its location, which means that that the person allowed to carry this item in order to clean, to clean the move any vessel and places in anywhere he chooses, in order to again. הצלה מצויה, for something that you save. But if לכתחילה, if in the first intent, if you need to carry it for the purpose of muktzah, you cannot do it. So now GEMARA continue asking question of Rabbi Yitzchak. תשמע, אחת ביצה שנולדה בשבת ואחת ביצה שנולדה ביום טוב, אין מטלטלין לא לכסות בה את הכלי ולא לסמוך בה את קרעי המיטה. So when you take the egg and you put it at the top of the egg, you can put something at the top of that. Egg is basically muktzeh if it was born on Shabbat or Yom Tov. So you cannot use it for any purpose. So so he said you can do if the egg was laid on Shabbat or on a festival, one may neither move it to cover the vessel nor support the leg of beds. However, one may cover it with a vessel so it will not break. אבל כופה על הכלי בשביל שלא להישבר. הכנה מי בצריך למקומו. So here too, referring to a vessel that one need to move it because it requires its location. So a person can move from one location to another. So it's okay to cover the egg for that. So basically, Tosfot here in Dibur Matchil Kofeh, he says Kol Hanu Demaite Yada Makshe Dematzi Leshinuye. So he knew basically the answer. It was a question in order to clarify. Tashma, another question. פורסים מחצלות על גבי אבנים בשבת. One may spread mats at the top of stones on Shabbat. Why? So he said here, because you need the protection, Rashi said, in order to avoid the rain, to erase it, and or in order to avoid water to get in, and therefore they cannot stay strong. So how come you're allowed to carry that on Shabbat? So he said, באבנים מקורזלות וחזיין לבית הכיסא. So this apply to a rounded rock that was suitable to use for bathroom. So you can carry them on Shabbat. Kasavar. So he said, תשמע, פורסים מחצלות על גבי לבנים בשבת. One may spread mats at the top of bricks on Shabbat. Bricks may not be used on Shabbat, but nevertheless one is permitted to carry mats for the sake of the bricks that prohibited for use on Shabbat. So he said, why? Because you fear that it will not erase in the rain. So usually those mats are standing for the sake of building, and it's a muktzeh on Shabbat. But here the brighter allow to carry those machzalot, those mats, to cover it. So how come? So they said the ishteyu mi binyana, that it's a leftover from completed building. The chazyan lemizga halayu, that they are suitable for people to lean on them. So they are like other household vessels, and moving them and moving mat to protect it is permitted. So in those days they use it. In those days they used to sit, like you read in Agada, People lean and sitting on the very low bench, and they lean on the left side, and because of those is ready for building, so it's considering a kli and it's not a muktzeh. תשמע, פורסים מחצלת על גבי כוורת דבורים בשבת, בחמה מפני החמה ובגשמים מפני הגשמים, ובלבד שלא יתכוון לצוד. So you can, one may spread a mat over a beehive on Shabbat, in the sun due to the sun, in the rain due to the rain, as long as he does not intend to trap the bees by covering them, because the basically beehive it's muktzeh, but even though it's muktzeh, these bright are allowed to carry the mat, because this beehive it's called basis, it's the foundation for the bees. So between the bees and the beehives, both are muktzeh on Shabbat. So therefore Rabbi Yitzchak hold that you cannot carry a vessel for that purpose. So they said, Hacha b'may askinan, here what we're talking about, we're dealing with the ikadvash. So if they have a honey, where there is a honey on the beehive, so therefore dvash is something that they can use for eating, and therefore honey it's not muktzeh. So the brighter allowed to go ahead and spread the mat over the beehive, because he does that for the sake of the honey that you allow to carry. Amar lerav ukva mimeishal leravashi. We said, wait a second. Teinach, this answer is good, granted, bimotachama, that you allow to spread a mat over a beehive. That applies specifically on the summertime. 43b, the ikadvash, because there is honey in the beehive during the summer, so therefore you can put a mat on the top of the honey. However, bimot agshamim delay kadvash, in the winter time that you don't have in the winter much honey, ma'ikale meima, why allowed to go ahead and carry the mat on the beehive? So the basic assumption that you're talking about summertime and winter time. So they said here, לא נצרכה אלא לאותן שתי חלות. So what we allow to cover on the winter time, it's because you need it for the two challah loaf, challah bread, honeycomb, thank you, that you use it in the beehive for the winter time, so the bees has some food, because the bees' manner is as follows: they fill up the beehive with that honey, and when it's filled up in many holes inside there, that they collected the honey inside, and when the owner of that beehive collected that honey from the beehive, he leave always the amount of this two honeycomb, thank you, for the food for the bees in the winter time, because that's the GEMARA in Bava Batra explaining. So because the honey inside those two is permissible for eating, so you can carry the mat in order to protect the honey, even according to Rabbi Yitzchak. So the GEMARA asked and said, "V'ha muktzot ninhu," but these two are basically set aside, and it's forbidden to carry it, because again, Yichud, he designated those for the purpose of the bees. So because he designated it, and it's like set aside, it's like muktzeh. So here we are back to the old business, what Rabbi Yitzchak asked, how come the Braita allowed to carry that cover for the purpose of the beehive? So they answered and they said, the chashiv alayhu, which means that he thought before Shabbat, he had in his intent to eat those two, and since the honey in the beehive is ready for use and it's not muktzeh, so therefore you're allowed to carry the mat for that purpose. So the Gemara asked and said, but wait a second, ha lo chashiv alayu mai asu? If one did not think about them, what will be the ruling? It will be prohibited to cover the beehives. So he said, why? Because you think that the honey inside is a muktzeh? יחי הדתני ובלבד שלא התכוון לצוד, לפלוג ולתני בדידה. What you told me earlier, that as long as you don't intend to do what? To
use it.
לצוד, to hold.
To keep the bees in, right?
To keep the bees. We are forbidden לצוד בשבת. For example, if you want to if you see a house, you have in your yard like those things for your bicycles or whatever it is, right, in your yard, and the door is open, and you see an animal's running there, okay? You cannot go ahead and lock the door
and trap the animals.
And trap the animals, and even you intend to slaughter the animal or to do whatever it is after Shabbat. During Shabbat, it's forbidden. Is tzid, is like hunting.
Trapping, yeah.
Trapping. By the way, it's a side note, ba'alacha, it's a big question, machloket aposkim, but it's a big question. For example, you have a drawer, that fly came in the drawer. Now the drawers packed, or they have many flies there. So this is the same problem. Can you close that drawer? You're basically trapping them. The same, you're sitting in your, let's say, Shabbat Sukkot, and there's the bees coming around. So you are bothered with the bees. So what do? You take a big vessel and you cover them. You cannot do it on Shabbat, right? Even you may say, I'm not killing them, but you're trapping them.
We can't do either, so.
Right.
You just gotta go away.
By the way, Moshe Feinstein hold that you cannot do it even not on Shabbat. He said that it's an issue of tsar ba'alei chayim, creating a sorrow for them.
Trapping them.
I mean, yes, you just want them to move away, but you don't create them suffering, because the minute they are stuck there, they are suffering. You know, like putting them in a jail.
I understand. What about like small insects, killing them during the week?
Look, if they really bother you, right? If, for example, mosquitoes in a sukkah,
right, that's what I'm saying.
So that's different. But Moshe Feinstein hold that there is a concept of tsar ba'alei chayim that create a sorrow for animals.
Oh, I understand.
We are forbidden.
Again, as we talked about before, the inherent compassion that's in Jews. It's just something we don't do. We try not to do if at all possible.
Right. Okay, so back, we said, במה דברים אמורים? When we allowed to carry this mat and put it at the top of the beehives, when in the winter time, כשחישב עליהן, which means he thought about these two before Shabbat to eat that. אבל לא חישב עליהם אסור, but if he did not plan in advance to carry the mat on Shabbat, because in the beehives there is nothing that you're allowed to carry. And there is a concept that said, אין כלי ניטל אלא לצורך דבר הניטל, which means that you cannot carry it only for the purpose of a certain thing that you designated clearly in advance.
So if you designated in advance that you were going to go get one of the honeycombs out to use on Shabbat, then that honeycomb you could move, but you couldn't. I mean, if you designated in advance that you said, one of the honeycombs that's in my beehive I'm going to take out and use on Shabbat, I'm going to use the honey.
Okay, so the point is, if you're talking, it's right what you said in a sense of point of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
In the final halacha, we discussed the final halacha, it's a little different. But as far as the
probably
discussion...
you should take it early, before Shabbat, you should take it out.
But as far as the point of discussion, you are correct.
So it's not, that one honeycomb is not muktzeh, but everything else in the hive, including the other honeycombs that you didn't designate, are all muktzeh.
At this point of discussion, yes.
Okay.
Okay, but...
There's more.
Yes. But the prohibition of the trapping, he's not occupied with... you cannot say that it's an issue of caring, because we are jumping here between caring and trapping, which is two different things. So in this point of discussion, we don't get to the point that he differentiate, the Tana differentiate between if he thought in advance or not thought in advance, because he holds that you can carry the mat for the purpose of because if you need this, yes, the honey. But it's just a point of question, it's not final.
Yeah, I'm not, and again, not knowing how the beehives were built in those days, but nowadays the way the beehives are built, they actually can get in and out from the bottom, and they always have a cover on the top that protects them. So, you know, it's a little different situation nowadays, but...
Hakamash Melan, so the Braita come to teach us, even a person planned in advance before Shabbat to eat them, so as far as the carrying, it's not an issue of carrying this mat, but there is another limitation. As long as a person has no intent to do what? To trap them. Those bees in the beehives. Right? So we want to avoid damage, the honey from any damage. But if it has in his intent also to trap the bees,
no good.
It's forbidden. Okay? Money. Who hold that way? So they said, Rabbi Shimon, right, that he thought in advance about this before Shabbat. Lately muktzeh, he doesn't hold this idea of muktzeh. So he holds that you can eat it even if not planned it in advance. Rabbi Yehuda, that he said as long as he did not intend to trap them, כי לא מתכוון מה יהווה, הדבר שאין מתכוון אסור. So Rabbi Yehuda hold that you cannot do anything, any action that indirect carry a type of work, which means even you don't intend to do this type of work, but if the consequence, if the result is a work, he said that that's a problem, you cannot allow that. So therefore, you can, according to that view, you cannot take the mat and cover the beehives, even he doesn't meant to trap them. So he said, Le'olam Rabbi Yehuda. We must say that that's applied to Rabbi Yehuda, that he is more stringent when it's come to muktzeh. Mai ubilvad shelo yitkaven latzud. So what do you mean by saying that as long as he's not you have unintentional act of trapping them? He said shelo ya'asena kimtzuda delishbuk lehu ravcha ki echad lo litatzdu mimela. That as long as he's not planning it, he's a smart man. He's taking the mat, he's covering in a certain way that he gives the bees, as you said earlier, a little spot to escape. So, so those bees will not be trapped there. So Rashi said, but if he doesn't leave a space for the bees to run out, it's forbidden. Even he doesn't intend to trap the bees, right? Even according to Rabbi Shimon, by the way, if you understand this Rashi deeply, even according to Rabbi Shimon, you cannot cover totally the beehives, right? because there is a concept that is a psik ratio. We explained many times. Psik ratio meaning it's like you take a chick, you can take a hen and you cut off the head. So even the hen can run a little bit, but they eventually will be dead, right? So psik ratio, if you do something, eventually something will happen. So if you cover, even the bee are not dead yet, or they're not being trapped there, but eventually they are trapped. So therefore, even according to Rabbi Shimon, is a problem. But it's a lot of the rabbis have a lot to say over this. It's a long discussion, what and when and how, and what's the real difference between the summer and winter. When it's come to halacha, at the very end, final halacha, we discuss it a little bit. Rav Ashi amar mi katan lebimot hachama ubimot hagshamim. Rav Ashi said that can be resolved differently. Why? Did the Braita teach in the summer and the rainy season? Bechama mipnei hachama ubagshamism mipnei hagshamim katane biyom Nisan ubiyom Tishrei diika chama v'ika tzina v'ika gshamim v'ika dvash. So he said the sun due to the sun and the rain due to the rain. So you should interpret it as follows. In the day of the month of Nisan, close to Passover, and the day of Tishrei, the time of the high holidays, right? So there is a time the sun shining, the time that it's cold weather, and there is a rain, and there is a honey in the beehives. So basically, those days, it's clear that it's a combination of both. So since there is a honey in a beehive, you can cover the beehives with the mat in order to protect them in the winter time, when it's cold, right? Because there is a honey there that people can use for food. But in a very, very cold winter, when there is no honey that people can use, you may say that this bright did not allow you to do what? To take the mat and cover it, because the beehive and whatever is there, it's muktzeh, and that's follow whom? Rabbi Yitzchak. So basically, let's wrap up what we said so far. The idea of Rabbi Yitzchak, there is a 3 explanation of the Mishnah that forbids to put a vessel under the lamp. Number 1, the Rabbah, in explaining of the Rav Chizda, only if it's an issue of saving. Hatzala she'ena metzuya, rare situation, you need to save something. 2, bitul kli me'echanot, the prohibition against changing the status of a vessel. 3, Rabbi Yitzchak, that he said, en kli nital, you cannot carry any vessel only for the purpose ela davar nital b'Shabbat, only for something that you're allowed to carry on Shabbat. So in the basically on Shabbat we said that you sometimes allowed to carry this if, for example, there is a severe leak that comes from the roof, etc., etc. There are certain situations that you do allow. But again, we'll discuss it later when it's come to a final halacha. אמר לו רב ששת, פוקו ואמרי לרבי יצחק כבר תקרא רב הונא לשמתך בבבל. So Rav Sheshet said that Rav Huna already explained you halacha in Bavel, which is en kli nital ladavar hanital, that the vessel may only be moved for the sake of something that may be moved. דאמר רב הונא עושים מחיצה למת בשביל חי ועושים מחיצה למת בשביל מת. Is the issue if you have a corpse that it's called muktzeh mechamat gufo, that you have a dead body because it's no other use. So only dead body, the corpse that it's laid out in the sun. So what happened with the body? It's carries odor after a certain period of time. So you're allowed to go ahead on Shabbat and put a mat, machzelet, on the top of the body. Even you do it also for a living person. Why? Because basically you don't leave the body alone. So there are 2 people on both sides. We learn later in halacha. So therefore, you're allowed to go ahead and make this. So even this match what Rabbi Yitzchak said earlier, that you cannot carry kli, which is the mat, for the muktzeh, for the dead corpse, right? And that's basically what, soon we explain how you do it for a living person. It said, Maihi, what is the meaning in these words? He said, Amar Rav Shmuel, Bar Yehuda, V'chen Tana Shil Amarim, Meta Mutal Bechama. If there is a dead body in the sun, there are two people sitting next to the dead body. And I explained many times here, whenever you have a situation of dead body, you never leave it alone. It's always a shomer. If it's too hot, if it's a summertime, it's too hot to sit, so you can bring a bed or some mattress or something so they can sit on that. But if it's too hot for them to sit all Shabbos next to the corpse, so you're allowed to go ahead and bring a mat and cover them for the protection from the sun. And after a period of time, זה זוקף מיטתו ונשמט והולך לו, וזה זוקף מיטתו ונשמט והולך לו, ונמצא מחיצה עשויה מעליה. So each of them take its own mat after a certain time, and he move and he slipped away and leaves, and the other guy slipped away and leaves, and then you have the partition that was created over the corpse and its own without erecting it directly for the sake of the corpse. So what we understand here, we do that in order to avoid two things. One, en kli nital el davar nital. A vessel may only be moved for the sake of something that may be moved. So so that's the reason why lechatchila, the first place, you cannot bring this mat or this bed for the purpose of the corpse. So what's the reason you bring it? For the living people who escort the dead body. Okay? But then when it's already happened that they took this bed or this mat for themselves, you can go ahead and now you can use it for what? For the corpse. Even lechatchila, you cannot use it for the corpse. Tosfot here elaborate. And he said that basically if it's already made that it's covered the corpse, they're not supposed to leave, they're supposed to stay there. Now, you may ask a question of boneh. We are not allowed to build a tent, to build ohel on Shabbat.
Right.
Some rabbis say that that's applied for the permanent, something you do it permanently. But if you do it for the temporarily, it's rabbinic. It's not biblical. So, and the rabbis forbids it only if you do it in a manner of building intentionally bniyat oil kedarko. You're building intentionally oil a tent the way that you build tent, which means that like you're making a sukkah. You put the walls first, and then you put the schach, etc., etc. But if you make it in shinui, if you change the order, if you don't do it in a regular manner, so you can go ahead and do it. For example, if you start with a schach and then you do the walls, right? So for example, or you put it in the air and then you put the walls around, that's different. So and here when you talk about the partition, it happened by itself, since these people took it for the living. And by the way, that's what happened. Itmar. Now we learned in conjunction to that a Amoraic dispute to that, and they said, Meta mutal bechama. Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel ofcho mimita lemita. Rav Hanania bar Shlemia mishmei de Rav Amar meniach halav kikar tinok umetaltelo. If you have a situation that the corpse that was laid out in the sun, so Rav Yehuda said, the name of Shmuel, that one turned over the bed and the bed until it reached the shade, right? So basically he hold the bed and he shake the corpse, and therefore eventually they're reaching the point of the shade, and then it happens that now it's a shade, but it's not kedarko. It's not the way that you do it in the regular way. Why? Because we're not carrying muktzeh. The other way, he says, you put. It's not in a regular manner. You're putting either a bread or little baby, etc. So you're making this muktzeh basis, a foundation for something that you allow, which is if you need to carry the baby, just hypothetically speaking, and the baby is on the top of a corpse. So now the baby is a living, you're allowed to carry the baby, and the corpse is the basis, is the foundation ledavar mutar, for something that you're allowed to. So the muktzeh, it's considering tafel laheter, is derivative, is a subsequent, is a something below the something that it's permissible. So therefore you can go ahead, the Ritva said, and carry this muktzeh agav tiltul heter, as a side, which means and I just want to say it as a side note, because that's a very important Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish said it in Orach Chaim Mem Zayin. He said that this is an exception, that the rabbis allow for the dead body. As you know, we are very sensitive for the holiness of life, of a living, and the sacredness of the people, of the human, even after passing, until we complete burial. We are very carry a tremendous honor for people who are physically no longer among the living, yet we have the obligation to bury them respectfully. So therefore, when it's come to a dead body, the sages are very lenient in order to have what we call kvod habriot. We want to show the respect we have, and because the corpse is in the sun, and it's carry disrespectful to the corpse because it's carry a bad odor that come out of the dead body. So therefore, we allow it. Usually, we're not allowed to carry muktzeh, but here, if you put chefetz shel heter, like a bread, like a baby, then you can go ahead and move it. Heicha deika. Now we clarified and we said kikar o tinok kule alma lo plige de shari. Whenever you have a dead body and you have a baby available, or you have a bread, for example, so then everyone agree that you can go ahead and carry and move. Ki plige, the Amoraic disputes is the letle, which means you cannot find around the baby, you cannot find around a piece of bread to put in order for you to use it right away. So the Ramban and the Ritva say that this issue, we enter the domain, it's called tiltul me'atzad. Tiltul me'atzad meaning that you carry it indirectly. You basically, you're moving an object in a very untypical manner. You're moving it from, it's like derivative from the norm, not in the regular way. So kri plige de letle, if you don't have mar savar, tiltul me'atzad, shmei tiltul, umar savar lo shmei tiltul. One hold that carry in a manner of something that is not a normal, not in a norm. Tiltul min hatzad, just as a definition, I would like to elaborate for a minute. Tiltul min hatzad meaning you're taking a vessel and you moving it without holding from the handlers. Thank you. But by doing indirect moving, by moving something else. So, for example, you're taking the corpse and you move the corpse from one bed to another bed. It's not by carrying the dead himself, but by holding the handler of the bed, and the tiltul, the carry, it's kil achar yad. Those of you who went to a surgery know that they carry the person to the surgery room, and then if he or she cannot move, they move the bed and they put it on the table of the surgery. All right. So here the same thing, that it's called kil achar yad, because Rav hold that even in that option it's forbidden because it's muktzeh. And Shmuel said that that's permissible, that you can do it because it's tiltul menatzad. It's not in a normal way, it's in an unnorm way. So now we go and we said this is based on the Tanaik. You remember the Tanaik is much earlier than Amoraik. Lema ketanai. Now we discuss another issue, which is saving a person in a case of fire. Which means if it's a fire, you have an issue to save. Now you have a dead body already. So there are those who said that one may not rescue a corpse from a fire on Shabbat. Here is the issue. You have a corpse and you have a fire. So if it's there's this famous tractate in the Mishna, there are certain things you allow. Corpse, it's basically muktzeh. So we said here you cannot do it. Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish shamati shematzilin et hamen mipnei adleka. I heard from my teacher that you can do that, but you have to do it in a sense of a different manners. You don't do it in the regular, usual manner. I give you a small example, just a derivative example, so you get the point of what does that mean, not norm. You need to open a jar. So you have a certain vessels that you open the jar. But if you turn it around the opposite way, you use a knife or a hammer, even it's not on Shabbat, that's basically not in a normal manner of opening a jar. Okay, or imagine if you need to open a door or the door of a refrigerator and you do it with your back or your leg, not with your hands in a normal manner of doing it. Here we're talking about you saving the corpse from the fire, but I heard, he said, from my teachers that you do it but not in a normal way, in a different way. Hechedame, how you do it. So he said, if you have a bread or a baby, right? My tama. Why you said that it's forbidden? Everybody agree that you can carry the corpse in that situation. He says, Leika, if you don't have those like baby or bread or something like that, my tama de Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish, why are you allowed to carry it? Elalav betiltul min hatzad pligei. There are disputes over what? If you allow to turn around the corpse around from one bed to another bed, not directly by touching it, but if you don't have a baby or you don't have a bread and you need to carry the corpse, what you do, you hold the handlers. Several people hold the handler and you remove the cob not by touching the muktzeh, not by touching the corpse, but you touching what? The bed. The bed. The Mar savar tiltul min hatzad shmei tiltul. The first one was probably Rav hold that it's still considering carrying. Umar Sava, which is Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish, hold lo shmei tiltul, that carrying min hatzad is not considered tiltul. So therefore, he hold that you can save a corpse from the fire, even you don't have a bread or baby. How you do that? You're taking the bed and you turn it around. So this dispute between Rav and Shmuel, it's founded with the whole foundation of question if tiltul min hatzad shmei tiltul or lo shmei tiltul. So in other words, it's not something that we, meaning the Amoraik, the much later rabbis come up, it's already come out, invented much earlier by the Tanaik disputation. So we reject that and we said no, lo. The Kule Alma, that everyone agreed tiltul min hatzad shmei tiltul. Which means if you have a dead body in the sun, you cannot turn it around by everyone. The only disputation applied to what? A situation of fire. V'hainu tama de Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish, that he allowed to carry the corpse in a time of fire. Mitoch she'adam bahul al meito, because since a person is agitated about his deceased relative and is concerned about maintaining the dignity of the dead, ilo sharitle, we just turn the page around, ilo sharitle, if you do not permit to do what? You not allow him to remove the corpse. Even in a min hatzad, in a not typical manners, guess what he's going to do? Atele kabuye. The person will go and extinguish the fire. So therefore the sages is more makel, it's more lenient, and permitted performing an act or prohibited by a rabbinic law, so it will not come to transgression of what? Of Torah law. So in conclusion we said, Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Shila, Amar Rabbi Yasa, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, L'chak Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish bemet, which means in a dead body. Tosfot here elaborating that at length, but he said that when a person is in such a great agony and so agitated, so and we afraid that he's going to violate the Torah law, it's called kibui, extinguishing on Shabbat. So the sages are lenient, and since the whole idea here applied to a rabbinic law, which is melacha she'ena tzricha legufa, so therefore the rabbis are more lenient. So that's applied even to the full tiltul, a full carry. And just finish before we get to the Mishnah, we speak about the oil. It said that one may not make use the oil that was dripped when the candle on Shabbat, because it's not among the oil that prepared from Shabbat Eve for use on Shabbat. So the Tanu Rabbanan Mutar Hashemen Shebaner B'Shakara Asur Rabbi Shimon Matir. He said the remaining oil that is in lamp on the boil that was weak, was burning, is prohibited on Shabbat. Rabbi Shimon permitted, because Rabbi Shimon said that it's nothing prohibited to the prohibition of set aside. So the whole idea of migo, that we said that since it's a muktzeh before Shabbat, it's a muktzeh the entire Shabbat, that's basically the machloket, but Rabbi Shimon allowed it. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 301, Bitul Kli Meheichano. It is prohibited to place a vessel that one is permitted to move beneath an object whose use is prohibited on Shabbat. By doing so, a person negates the vessel of availability. Now, Chavit Shel Tevel, it is permitted to place a vessel beneath a barrel of untied produce that was broken on Shabbat in order to preserve its content, because although tightening untied product on Shabbat is prohibited, lechatchila, but b'diavad is fine. Korah shenishbera, a beam that broke. It is permitted to support a ceiling beam that broke on Shabbat with the long side of a bed frame, provided that it's loosely supported and that the beam is not thereby raised, but is merely prevented from falling any further. This does not negate the bed frame's preponderance, which means raising the beam is prohibited as constitute the prohibition of labor, of bniyah, of building. Kli tachat adlaf, if you have a leaking, so it is permitted to place a vessel beneath a leak on Shabbat, specifically when the water is at least minimally suitable for use, for example, for bathing. But if it's unsuitable for use, it is prohibited. Basket of a chick, which can derive a lot of halacha. One may overturn, that's a Rambam Hilchot Shabbat 25. One may overturn a basket in front of the chicks so that they may climb into it. Moving the basket while they are inside is prohibited. If the chicks were atop the basket during the twilight, when Shabbat began, it is prohibited to move it, because an object that is set aside at twilight remain set aside for the entire Shabbat. That's the migo we learned today. Migo de katzai ben hashmashot katzai lekula yoma. How about the beehive? So we said, porsin machzelet al gabei מכוורת דבורים, covering a beehive with a mat to protect from the sun or rain is permitted, provided that one does not intend to trap the bees inside the hive. In addition, one is required to leave a small opening so that the bees will not trap inside with no means of escape. In that case, trapping the bees will be an inevitable consequence of his action, and placing the mat will be prohibited. Meta mutal b'chama, that's important halacha. That's the way Hashem created the world, and we have to deal sometimes with corpse. So the corpse that is laid out in the sun, listen carefully, that's Shulchan Aruch Or HaChaim 3:11, and also Rambam Hilchot Shabbat, chapter 25. If a corpse was out in the sun on Shabbat, and there was no place to move it, or for some reason they did not want to move it, 2 people should sit on either side of the corpse. When the ground feels hot, each brings a bed upon which to sit. When the sun is hot, each spread a mat over the bed to shield them from the sun. Then each stands the bed on its side and leaves, and the 2 beds and the 2 mats together from impromptu structure to protect the corpse from the sun. That's like in a side manners. How about a corpse in a fire? When there is a corpse in a place that caught fire on Shabbat, one place a loaf of a bread or an infant on the top of the dead body or beside it in a bed and moves it out of the house. If there is no loaf of bread or no infant available, but there are 2 beds, then one move the corpse from one bed to another until it is outside the house. If those options are unavailable, one may lift the corpse and carry it outside. And that's an important Rambam in Hilchot Shabbat, chapter 26. Hashem